I think we're fine. We can just cut. So, first comments or first questions, please. Narrative of the contemporary development in the religious and political sphere in Turkey is framed like this: that there is a certain secularism and there is democracy. And basically, some kind of there is this surge of democracy against secularism. On the other hand, we hear this kind of worrisome news. For example, the Erdogan government finding some newspapers or jailing the political opponents, etc. So, is this really really about democracy? Is it really kind of can we describe this process in terms of democracy, or it's really kind of political struggle in which then religion is kind of used and manipulated as a kind of factor?
I think there are a few things happening at the same time. I wouldn't say it's one or the other. I do think it is a process of democratization. Your question was also about liberalism in a way. Is it you have a democracy, but is it liberal enough? Or if yes, how do you define that? I think it's also part of the question that you're asking. I think both are happening at the same time. For instance, this week it's the number one topic that is in all newspapers is the abortion issue. It was not an issue in Turkey for a very long time, but Prime Minister Erdogan sort of talked about his view of it is that he's not very comfortable with the idea of abortion. And obviously he phrased that differently because all the women's rights groups, they all agree and talk back, but Erdogan himself said he thinks like it is no different than killing a human being. And in a way, part of the justification for this debate was they discussed it in the US, why not in Turkey? So if you look at, well, you could argue that, wait a second, is this in a liberal society, is this even an issue to be discussed? I mean, abortion, come on, it should be the individuals. Who is the state, after all, to interfere with the woman's body that much? I mean, that could be one argument, but then again, you can also say, if we are talking about a liberal democracy, why not talk about it? If we have some people who want to talk about it, then we should be talking about it as well. So what needs to be discussed, what can be discussed and cannot be discussed is it's actually quite problematic if we start putting it that way, because if everything should be discussed in a liberal democracy, why not those subjects as well that we're not really very comfortable hearing about perhaps, but that should be okay, because it might be my comfort zone but not someone else's. It might be something that I am comfortable with, but not on the other hand, it might not be too easy to digest for other people for different reasons, be that religion or political affiliation or ethnicity or this and that. So I think it's happening both at the same time, and that is one indication why it is still a democracy. It's still an experiment, since it's still an ongoing experiment. Turkey is in a very interesting region where sort of there's this big change taking place, and there's big enthusiasm for democracy, for more democracy and liberalism as well. And Turkey might be ahead of the game in a little bit because it has 70 or 80 years. It started earlier than others, but it still doesn't mean that it's over, it's done, it's a perfect example. So I think the reason that we observe both authoritarianism and more liberal reactions to that, and more attempts at having more democracy and more cultural and religious rights, I think is one reason, it actually is the main reason that this experiment is still taking place. But in a way, I don't know if it satisfies you at all, but it's all of those happening.
I have a question to Sir Richard actually, but I cannot abstain from noting once more some Georgian paradox, that on the one hand we have a rising role of church and religion and discuss, but in Georgia abortion is not an issue, or strength of family values, nobody talks about that, while religion is getting stronger. Maybe that's why I'm a little skeptical about morality-related aspects of Georgian church, and there is much greater stress on identity-related parts. But my question was about the very last thing that Richard said, this umbrella role of the Church of England, because different churches are by definition also competitors on the market, or the souls, or whatever you call it. So, I mean, they believe that their doctrine is true and the doctrine of other churches is false, right? If you are a believer, that's what you are supposed to believe. So, maybe in the technique of that, how would one church be interested in cultivating or strengthening other churches under its umbrella, under its lens?
Some forms of Islam are, but not the majority Islam. Majority Islam in Britain. So when I talked about acting as an umbrella, that wasn't my phrase, that was the phrase of the chief rabbi in Britain. What he meant was that other religions felt more confident about being able to contribute to public discussion and the formation of public policy because of the role of the Church of England. And that is because the Church of England, at least for the last 60 or 70 years, has never seen itself simply there to fight for the interests of the Church of England. It's always seen its role to serve the nation. The bishops in the House of Lords don't see themselves, as it were, there simply as factional supporters of the Church of England. And every parish priest will see themselves there as trying to serve the whole neighbourhood, the whole parish, whether people are believers and members of their church or not. So when we talk about an umbrella, it's about the capacity of other religions to actually be confident in the public sphere and make their voices known with a view to helping to formulate public policy.
Abortion issue in Georgia. It's true that there is no public discussion about it, but still the practice is there in the sense that a woman can go to for example, a hospital, and she can be denied the operation based on the religious grounds. Surgeons and nurses and so on. So there are cases. So I think this is surreptitiously going, it will still come. And it's very kind of related to the purity of nation, and then it will have somehow morality will be fused into it. I'm pretty sure about that. But let's see.
If I could just comment briefly on that, I mean, written into the law in Britain is the conscience clause, so that doctors and nurses are allowed not to do abortions on conscientious grounds. That was written into the 1967 Abortion Act. They refuse to do it because they're object to abortion altogether. They're not concerned about whether the person is a believer or not. They're just opposed to abortion. So practically Roman Catholic doctors will not do abortions, and that's respected as part of the kind of diverse society where we do have an alpha respect for individual conscience.
Thank you.
Somebody at the back.
Oh, was it?
Group. I'm thinking particularly of the case that there's a disagreement on between France and I think Britain, for instance, in relation to Scientology, which I think the French courts ruled was a cult, which shouldn't be given charitable status, but I think in other countries is given recognition as religion. Where do you draw lines like that, or rather, how do you draw lines like that? Does a group have to describe itself as a religion to be a religion? How they form?
Europe countries or something like that. So it's we delegate the authority to others, but how those others do it. Of course, it's an interesting issue. I know I am aware of Scientology dilemma, let's say so, but I don't know how more experienced democracies do that.
But also to others if they feel like coming in. Well, the recent sort of results of social sciences emphasize the positive role of religion in building social capital, in maintaining all the sort of structures of solidarity and communality, which are sort of necessary for a successful functioning, not only of democratic, but certainly of democratic society, and a condition of having a living and functional democracy, and I'm referring to here voting alone. Also, to just success of any sort of viable, modern society. And on the other hand, I mean, in the institutions of the European Union, the prevalent sort of animate, prevalent the official sort of point of view seems to be this sort of kind of secularizing discourse of sort of Voltaire type, the great infamy of religion, which is sort of to be kept in bounds with very strong checks and actually, sort of not allowed to get out of line, rather than a positive sort of partner to work in together, not the British model certainly, and which is quite paradoxical in the view of the fact that the fathers of the community were sort of mostly Christian Democrats and who spoke that Christianity is crucial to the success of the European project. Don't you think there is a sort of kind of mismatch and sort of kind of lagging effect of the official, as far as one can identify such, but that is very palpably felt sort of official ideology of the European Commission and other sort of institutions, and what social scientists have to say about the role of religion in democratic societies. And don't you think that some of the problems that Europe as a project is experiencing is partly due to this kind of lagging effect?
You're absolutely right, of course. It was religious values which lay at the heart of the emergence of democracy, as well as Enlightenment values. I mean, a lot of the early Enlightenment thinkers were religious believers of one kind or not anyway. But I would move the discussion on slightly, not just to the importance of moral values in helping to build democracy, but how crucial they are for a world now dominated by the free market. One of the most interesting movements over the last 10 years has been from secular philosophers crying out because of the lack of any proper moral framework for our civic life and for our economic life. I mean, Michael Sandel, a brilliant philosopher at Harvard, the latest book is simply called What Money Can't Buy, the moral limits of markets, and he's shown how many of the most valued moral principles in American society are now up for sale, that everything has been commodified. And he's not alone. I mean, you can look at, very interesting that Jürgen Habermas's recent book was called The Sense of Something Missing, an awareness of something missing. And he refers to the unexhausted force of religion. He thinks it's still necessary. I think we take it for granted, whatever the individual European members of the European Parliament might think, we take for granted that moral values are fundamental for building democracy, but the actual crucial need in the modern world is actually to set the market in a moral framework, because the market left to run riot, in fact, undermines all traditional values. Everything eventually comes up for sale unless we're careful. And it's interesting that if people who one wouldn't normally suspect of calling for this are actually calling from a very often a left-wing agnostic or atheistic position. They're saying that something is missing.
Just thought how that would be seen in the Georgian context.